Chelsea Football Club would go into the 2010-2011 season as Premier League and FA Cup double winners. The Blues had a fantastic, memorable season as Carlo Ancelotti had a dream debut season in England. The Blues played entertaining and attacking football throughout the season, doing league doubles over Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester United, scoring 103 Premier League goals in the process, which was a record at the time. The ghost of Jose Mourinho lingered around Stamford Bridge for a while after his sacking in September 2007. It was not meant to be for Avram Grant and Luis Felipe Scolari. Hiddink would bring the FA Cup to the Bridge in his brief interim spell at the club. Ancelotti was hired in the summer of 2009 and would bring the Premier League title back to Stamford Bridge for the first time in 4 years, and the FA Cup was retained. However, there was no doubt that the Italian was appointed purely to win the Champions League above everything. Chelsea were knocked out of the last 16 by Jose Mourinho's Inter Milan of all teams, who would win the Champions League in 2010. It was no secret that winning European football's most prestigious trophy was the target for Chelsea. For the first time since 2007, Chelsea would go into the season with the same manager they had the previous summer. The club would have a pre-season to forget. Many players played at the World Cup in South Africa, which was certainly one to forget for the English players, and would show some tiredness towards the upcoming season. The summer transfer window was another quiet one. 4 signings were made, however only 2 were for the first team. Thomas Callas was signed but immediately loaned back to the club he was bought from, Sigma Olomouc. Matej Delac was also signed. He was on Chelsea's books for 8 years and was loaned out 9 times, but never made an appearance. Amazingly, the goalkeeper was actually Chelsea's longest-serving player at one point until he left in 2018. Brazilian midfielder Ramirez was signed from Benfica for £18 million, and Yossi Benayoun would be signed from Liverpool. Not too many signings were made, but a handful of youth players would be promoted to the first team squad after winning the Youth Cup the previous season, and would go on to make their debuts in the upcoming season. Chelsea would say goodbye to a few fan favourites. Ricardo Carvalho left after 6 years, joining Real Madrid, a commendable centre-back who formed a legendary defensive partnership with John Terry, no doubt one of the best the Premier League has ever seen. Fellow Portuguese Deco would also leave the club, going to Brazil to play for Fluminense, where Giuliano Belletti would join him. Michael Ballack would go to Bayer Leverkusen after his contract had expired. The German is remembered fondly at the Bridge and is regarded as a cult hero, just like Joe Cole, who would leave Chelsea after 7 years, joining Liverpool on a free transfer. The champions would meet Manchester United in the traditional opener of the season in the Community Shield final for the 4th time in 10 years. Chelsea were hoping to repeat the results the year before. However, it would prove to be Man United's day as Ferguson's men would win 3-1. Chelsea were denied a stonewall penalty in the first half as Fabio clearly fouled Michael Essien. Antonio Valencia's goal would put the Red Devils 1-0 up in the 41st minute. United's new striker, Javier Hernandez, would score a pretty comical goal as he scuffed his shot, but the ball would end up hitting his face and end up in the back of the net. Solomon Kalou gave Chelsea a lifeline, but Berbatov's classy finish ended any hopes of Chelsea lifting the shield. The champions would start their defence of the title on the 14th of August 2010. It couldn't have gone any better as the Blues would put their dismal summer behind them, beating West Brom 6-0, who were being managed by Blues legend Roberto Di Matteo. However, Carlo Ancelotti revealed in 2016 that Roman Abramovich would summon him to his house after this game and he would receive a dressing down from the owner. Despite a resounding win and performance, the Russian was not happy with Chelsea's performance and demanded better. Ancelotti would answer this with another 6-0 win on matchday 2 the next week. This time Wigan were on the receiving end of this thrashing. 2 goals from Nicolas Anelka and Solomon Kalou would follow after Florent Malouda put the champions 1-0 up. Yossi Benayoun scored his first goal for the club in essentially the final kick of the game. Incredibly, there wasn't a single corner taken in this game. A straightforward 2-0 win over Stoke came next. 3 wins out of 3, 14 goals scored and none conceded made it the perfect start for the Blues before the international break. Chelsea would then be given a generous Champions League draw, with Zelina, Marseille and Spartak Moscow battling out the Blues in Group F. Chelsea would continue their fine start after international duties, winning 3-1 at Upton Park against struggling West Ham. Michael Essien bagged 2 goals and Kalou kept up his good form, getting on the score sheet. Former Blue Scott Parker would be the first man to score against the champions in the league. The hunt for the Champions League began, and it was away to Zelina, the first club that Chelsea officially played under Roman Abramovich's ownership. Just as it was in 2003, it was another comfortable win for the Blues, with Josh McEachran making his debut for the club. Van Aanholt made his Champions League debut, and Kakuta would also come off the bench. Ancelotti was clearly keen on integrating youngsters in the team. Premier League debutants Blackpool would then visit Stamford Bridge the following Sunday. The champions would comfortably beat the Seasiders with a 4-0 win, where all 4 goals were scored in the first half, making it 5 wins out of 5. The Blues would then be on the end of a bizarre 4-3 loss at home to Newcastle and would be knocked out of the League Cup. Young left-back Patrick Van Aanholt would score his first goal for the club, putting the hosts 1-0 up. However, Chelsea would find themselves 3-1 down by the 50th minute as Noel Ranger, Ryan Taylor and Shola Amiobi put the tune in front. The hosts would be hit by injuries in this game. Solomon Kalou, who came on for Gael Kakuta, would last just 10 minutes and would be replaced by Josh McEachran. Yossi Benayoun would also suffer an injury, and the Blues would be forced to play with 10 men for the remainder of the game, as they had used up all their subs. Nicolas Anelka would, however, claw 2 goals back, making it 3-3, but Amiobi's injury time goal would deny Chelsea a place in the next round. Man City would end Chelsea's 100% league record, as Mancini's men would edge a 1-0 win. Ancelotti's men would pick up and go into good form though. After a comfortable 2-0 win over Marseille, the champions would defeat Arsenal in the London derby. A routine Didier Drogba goal against the Gunners would open the accounts for the champions, and Alex would wrap up the win, scoring an amazing free kick, very similar to the one he scored against Liverpool in the Champions League quarter-finals 2 seasons prior. Chelsea would suffer a big setback during the international break. Yossi Benayoun would be ruled out for 6 months after it was revealed that his injury he suffered against Newcastle in the Carling Cup defeat was more serious than it turned out. It turned out that he torn his Achilles, and this was not noticed by Chelsea's medical staff and was noticed by the Israeli national teams instead. After a goalless stalemate at Villa Park after the break, Chelsea would win 4 games on the bounce. But on the 7th of November 2010, Chelsea would take a trip away to Anfield. The Reds had started very poorly under their new manager, Roy Hodgson, but were starting to pick up form, and Fernando Torres scored 2 good goals to topple the champions. After beating neighbours Fulham 1-0 in the midweek clash at Stamford Bridge, the next day, Chelsea would part ways with assistant manager Ray Wilkins after the club had decided not to renew his contract. This upset and angered many Chelsea fans, and Carlo Ancelotti would say in his autobiography, "Without him, we couldn't have won a thing, and in particular, we would not have started the year at supersonic speed." Wilkins was replaced by Michael Emenalo, a former Nigerian international who initially worked at the club as a scout. Ancelotti revealed that he did not have any personal problems with the Nigerian, but he told the club he did not want him as assistant manager. However, the club's decision was made, although Emenalo would not be involved in training sessions. Chelsea's season would then go downhill after the departure of Wilkins, and they would eventually lose ground in the bid to retain the title. 2 wins in 9 would follow: a humiliating 3-0 defeat at home to Sunderland, a 1-0 loss away to Birmingham, an unconvincing 2-1 win over Zelina, 1-1 draws in the league to Newcastle and Everton respectively, a 1-0 loss in a dead rubber game away to Marseille in the Champions League, and it would be a 1-1 draw for the 3rd league game in a row, this time away to Tottenham. Pavlyuchenko put the hosts 1-0 up before Drogba came off the bench and equalised in the 70th minute. The Ivorian would agonisingly miss a penalty in the 93rd minute, as Aurelio Gomez would be the hero for Tottenham, denying the champions a much-needed win. Chelsea's massive game against Manchester United on the 19th of December 2010 was postponed due to snow. It would then be another miserable trip to North London 15 days later for Chelsea, as Arsenal would get one over the Blues for the first time in 5 games, as the Gunners would win 3-1. The year 2010 would end in a scrappy 1-0 win over Bolton, a first win in 7 league games for the champions. The first game of 2011 would start with a draw, but this felt more like a loss to the Blues as Villa got a late equaliser at the bridge. Lampard's penalty opener would then be cancelled out by Ashley Young's penalty. Emil Heskey put the visitors 2-1 up. 2 late goals by Didier Drogba and John Terry put Chelsea on course for back-to-back league wins for the first time since October, but another late goal would deny a win as Kieran Clark snatched a point for the Villains. Another bad day at the office would come again in the trip to Wolves, as the Blues would fail to breach their defence after Jose Buswinga's early own goal would gift the relegation battling side a win. The defence of the FA Cup would be up next for Chelsea, and they would get a morale-boosting 7-0 win over Ipswich Town as the Blues destroyed the Tractor Boys. 2 goals from Daniel Sturridge and Frank Lampard respectively, Kalu, Anelka and an own goal from Ipswich's Carlos Edwards would earn Chelsea a tie versus Everton in the next round. A comfortable win over Blackburn would follow, and then an impressive win over Bolton Wanderers would be up next in the Monday night game. Drogba would break the deadlock. His goal of the season contender would put the champions 1-0 up. Malouda and Anelka would get on the score sheet, and Ramirez would finally open up his Chelsea account, scoring his first goal for the club this night. A tricky trip to Goodison Park would be up next for Chelsea in the FA Cup 4th round, in a repeat of the 2009 FA Cup final. Just like in the final a couple of seasons prior, Louis Saha would put Everton in the lead, although not as quick as he did before. Solomon Kalu's 75th minute equaliser would make sure that there would be a replay back at Stamford Bridge. With the January transfer window coming to a close, the Blues were in desperate need of some reinforcements. Young players that were promoted in the summer would be loaned out. Chelsea were linked with Liverpool striker Fernando Torres for the whole of January. They initially offered Liverpool $35 million, but the Reds would reject Chelsea's advances. But the Blues would finally get their man on transfer deadline day. The champions would finally secure the services of the Spanish striker for a British record of £50 million. It is reported that this was the release clause. This was also the 4th most expensive signing in football at the time. This stunned the world of football, as not many people actually saw this coming, despite Torres being linked with Chelsea in the past. Sturridge would have to make room, and he was loaned out to Bolton Wanderers until the end of the season. Chelsea also signed Brazilian centre-back David Luiz from Benfica for £21 million, plus Nemanja Matic was included in part of the deal, as he would join the Portuguese side at the end of the season, a legendary deadline day for sure. After beating Sunderland 4-2 at the Stadium of Light the night after transfer deadline day, Chelsea would host Liverpool at Stamford Bridge on Sunday 6 February 2011. Fernando Torres would make his Chelsea debut against the team he'd just signed from. It was a performance to forget for the striker and for the team in general, as Liverpool, who were finding form after Roy Hodgson's sacking and under their club legend Kenny Dalglish's management, would do the league double over the champions. Raul Morales' goal gave the Reds the win in a bitter loss. Torres was subbed off in the 63rd minute. David Luiz made his debut for the club on this day as well. The next game would be a Valentine's Day trip to Craven Cottage on the Monday night. The Chelsea away end was in full voice and had already had a new chant for Chelsea's new striker. Although Chelsea had dominated, the Blues were wasteful and nearly paid the full price. David Luiz, who had played well, would foul Clint Dempsey and Fulham had the chance to gain a rare win over the Blues. However, Petr Cech was the hero as he saved the Americans' penalty. It was a very lucky escape for the Blues. The holders of the FA Cup would then be knocked out by Everton. After a goalless 90 minutes, the tie would go to extra time. Frank Lampard scored in the 104th minute. However, Leighton Baines' excellent free kick would painfully equalise in the 119th minute. Penalties would then go to sudden death, and it was Ashley Cole who missed the penalty for the hosts, and Phil Neville slotted home to send the holders out. 3 days later, Chelsea took control of the last 16 Champions League first leg game against Copenhagen thanks to a Nicolas Anelka brace. On Tuesday, 1st of March 2011, Chelsea would gain a big win over title rivals Manchester United in this rescheduled game. Wayne Rooney put the Red Devils 1-0 up in the 29th minute, but Chelsea would come out fighting in the second half. David Luiz scored his first goal for the club with a great volley, and Frank Lampard slotted home a penalty that would seal 3 massive points for Chelsea. The next game was a Monday night trip to Blackpool, and it was a comfortable 3-1 win for the champions. The Champions League second leg game versus Copenhagen was a fairly drab 0-0, but it was enough to secure a massive quarter-final showdown versus Manchester United. Another big game was won as the champions defeated Manchester City 2-0. A pretty cagey game, but David Luiz once again got a big goal and scored in the 78th minute, and fellow Brazilian Ramirez would settle the nerves and scored a superb goal that was voted Chelsea's goal of the season. David Luiz was enjoying a fine start in West London. His somewhat untraditional style of play for a centre-back was catching a lot of attention. Ramirez was finally finding his feet at Stamford Bridge as well, after initially struggling. However, the same could not be said for new boy Fernando Torres, who was struggling to adapt in Chelsea colours and was still looking for his first goal for the club. Chelsea would draw 1-1 away to Stoke before the quarter-final showdown in the Champions League against Man United. Ferguson's men would win at Stamford Bridge for the first time in 9 years as they won 1-0 on the night. Wayne Rooney would give the Red Devils the advantage going into the second leg. Chelsea came so close for an equaliser after Drogba put in a nice cross for Fernando Torres. He nearly flicked home but was denied his first goal for the club by the post. Lampard would shoot on the rebound, but it would be blocked by Patrice Evra on the line. The Blues were denied a penalty for a foul on Ramirez in the box by Evra. It was a disappointing loss, but not over by any means, as the second leg would be played just 6 days later. After beating Wigan 1-0 at the Bridge the following weekend, Chelsea would travel to Old Trafford for the second leg of the Champions League tie. However, it was not meant to be for the Blues, as United would win 2-1 on the night and 3-1 on aggregate and go through to the semi-finals. The Blues nearly saw out the first half, but Javier Hernandez would score a tap-in one of the last kicks of the first half. Drogba replaced Torres in the second half. Brazilian midfielder Ramirez would then be sent off. Chelsea would still manage to get a goal, thanks to Drogba with a great finish. However, Ji-sung Park would put the hosts in front almost immediately after Drogba scored, and Chelsea would be sent packing out of the Champions League, a very disappointing loss, and it's widely agreed that Drogba should have started over Fernando Torres in this game. Chelsea's wait for the Champions League would go on. 2 3-1 wins would be secured over West Brom and Birmingham City respectively. On Saturday 23rd of April 2011, Chelsea would face West Ham in the 5:30 kickoff. It was a day of sunshine and torrential rain, and it was very nearly unplayable. Frank Lampard would give Chelsea the lead just before half-time, scoring against his former club. In the 84th minute, Fernando Torres finally got his first goal for Chelsea Football Club after coming off the bench and would make Stamford Bridge erupt in joy. He finally ended his 15-hour goal drought after the 50 million man had not found the net for 901 minutes for club and country. He had not scored in 732 minutes for the champions since joining in January, but it took him just 8 minutes to do so after coming off the bench. The jubilant Spaniard was mobbed by his teammates after finally breaking his duck. Torres would even get an assist, setting up Florent Malouda's goal in a fantastic 3-0 win to put the icing on the cake. Chelsea would then host another London derby. This time Tottenham were the visitors. Sandro gave the Lily-Whites the lead with a fantastic goal. Gomez would then spill a Frank Lampard shot which went through his legs. The goal was given to Chelsea despite all of the ball not quite going over the line. Solomon Kalou would then get the winner in the 89th minute as the Blues got a controversial win over Spurs. Arsenal would then do Chelsea a massive favour the next day as they would beat Man United 1-0 at the Emirates Stadium, which would then set up a more or less winner-take-all match between Man United and Chelsea the next week on the 8th of May 2011. Only 3 points separated the two sides, which seemed unthinkable just a few months prior. But it was another miserable trip to Old Trafford for the Chelsea faithful as Man United beat Chelsea 2-1 once again, which essentially sealed the title. The Red Devils officially became Premier League champions the next week after drawing 1-1 away to Blackburn Rovers. Newcastle would visit Stamford Bridge the day after Chelsea's Premier League crown was taken. A last-minute equaliser from Stephen Taylor would deny a victory over the Geordies. The draw assured Chelsea would finish second in the Premier League. The final game of the season was an away trip to Everton at Goodison Park. It was another miserable trip for the travelling Chelsea fans as Everton would defeat the Blues 1-0. Just an hour after the game had finished, Carlo Ancelotti was ruthlessly sacked in Everton's corridor. It is reported that Roman Abramovich was down the motorway and had texted Chelsea board member Ron Gourlay to dismiss the Italian from his duties. To this day, this sacking angers Chelsea supporters. Just a year prior, he had won Chelsea the double for the first time in their history, and his team had played some of the best football the Premier League has ever seen. It was clear that Chelsea's squad was ageing. Leaders and experienced players that had left the club were not properly replaced. The signings that were made in the summer and January transfer windows did not exactly deliver, on top of trying to balance Chelsea's overloaded attack. It's also widely agreed that the sacking of Ray Wilkins affected Chelsea's season. It's no coincidence that performances and results went downhill as soon as the Chelsea legend left the club. The next season for Chelsea Football Club would certainly be one that would live long in the memory, which we will cover in my next video. Thank you as always for watching, and please take care.